the Angelica Hook murder will always stick with me. When I first arrived at the crime scene, she was under the floorboards, but she was underneath a trapdoor. So the only answer at the end of the day was for me to go down into the hatch underneath the floorboards. And it was this tiny little space going down into this really dark area with this dead body, which was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying, but once you get down there and you start collecting the evidence, your professional head kicks in. Hi, I'm Carol. I'm a forensic biologist. I've been a forensic scientist for 26 years. I am the lead scientist for major crime with a specialism in sex offences for SP Forensic Services in Scotland. So my area of expertise really is driving forward the science and the investigations of rapes and sexual assault.
Wow. Hi there, I'm Deb, and I do the hair and makeup on the deceased, and I love it. It's a real passion of mine. I've been doing it for 27 years. Wow. I just love it. I just love helping families.
My name is Martin Jeffrey. I'm the Group Mortuary Manager, Team Leader and Embalmer for William Purvis Funeral Directors in Edinburgh. My job is mainly to make sure that any bodies that come into our care are treated with the most respect and dignity, and I kind of specialise in facial reconstruction or post-mortem facial reconstruction.
Wow. So I'm Katie. I am a soul midwife, which is like an end-of-life companion, like a death doula. So I do kind of the bit before, during and after death. But essentially I kind of quote myself as supporting the dying, honouring the dead and educating the living. And I think because I do the bit before death, I do the dying bit, and I feel a bit the odd one out because you guys obviously do the bit after death. So there's parts of your job that obviously I know about, but because I primarily focus on the before and the dying, there's so much about your worlds that I think are just fascinating.
Well, I think it goes in sequence. I think it's you, and then me.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I come in to support the dying. Hopefully it's expected. If it's not, that's where you come in.
Yeah.
And then say, yeah, you come in to do the technical bit, and then you do the presentation bit. It's like,
Do you think that death is a taboo?
I think death's a taboo just because it's difficult.
Yeah.
I think death is taboo because we don't want to deal with it because it hurts.
Yeah.
I think we also have become so divorced from death. We've become so detached and we think it's a medical, clinical thing, whereas actually death is a human experience.
It's inevitable for everybody. Death's inevitable for us all. And because it hurts so much and we all love each other and families and we all hurt, we don't want to face the point that death is inevitable and it's going to happen and it's going to hurt us all. We should be engaging with children at an earlier age to have them involved in funerals where they can, attending funerals, attending viewings. You know, for like my daughter, she's only 9. Through my job, she kind of knows about death, knows about the funeral process.
My son's the same, he's 12.
I'm not convinced it's going to help her emotionally when anything happens, but it might help her understand the process of the funeral and what death is.
So thankfully, like your daughter, my son knows all about what I do. He's decided that when I die, he's going to put my ashes into a magic 8 ball so that he can talk to me and ask me questions. And I'll tell him he came up with that. I feel I need to patent that, actually.
It's like my daughter, she says, I get people ready to go to heaven.
How amazing. I love that.
That was her when she was like 5-year-old, so the younger the better.
I think there's a morbid fascination as well with death.
True.
Whenever I say what my job is, the first thing I'll get asked is, have you seen dead people? Do you cut up dead people? And it's such a small part of my job. There's so much else that a forensic scientist does, but it's always that part of going out and seeing dead people who've been murdered. People want to know about. They want to know about the serial killers you've put in jail. Yeah, it's that side of it. So I think there's also, and maybe that morbid fascination comes from a fear, which comes from a taboo of talking about it. And on a personal basis, my husband died last year of a brain tumour. And I thought I knew what death looked like. And he died in front of me. And I'm just thinking, how can he be dead? He's not been stabbed. He's not had his throat slashed. I couldn't understand the biological process of it as a biologist who's been surrounded by death for 26 years. And if I'd had someone to help me understand that process, as a scientist who needs to analyse things to put them to bed,
Sure.
Yeah.
that would have helped me massively, and it all came as a huge big shock. And that's someone who's used to seeing dead people. So to have had somebody like you to explain the process would have made things much, much easier.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think this is also the way our society has gone, is we don't talk enough.
No.
I'm so sorry that you didn't have the support. Had you have done, it may not have made it easier. It doesn't take away the grief. It still is horrible and heavy. But there may have been part of you that could have gone, I can breathe actually, because this is natural. This is to be expected.
It was just crazy things like he stopped eating. So I'd be saying to nurses, well, you have to put a tube in, you have to feed him, he's going to starve to death. And they're saying, no, he doesn't need food anymore. And as a biologist, I should have understood exactly what that meant. But I didn't. But if you have someone to explain the process in a gentle way, it's probably easier to know what to expect.
Absolutely. And just interestingly, on the eating thing, that is probably one of the biggest and most common conversations I have with families.
Yeah, we had it this morning, didn't we?
Yeah, so when people are starting to die, the body naturally stops eating. Our body instinctively knows how to be born, how to grow, how to repair and how to recoup. It also instinctively knows how to die. A dying body isn't working effectively.
Yeah.
So what happens is we have to shift our narrative from thinking my person's starving and dehydrating to realise that they're not dying because they're not eating. They're not eating because they are dying.
Yeah.
And that in itself, when I have that conversation with people and I can see this weight lift and go, oh, so I don't have to panic. And also, I'm not starving my person.
Can you tell me about the first time you saw a dead body and how you felt?
I've got two sort of instances that stuck with me. The first one was I'd been made redundant from a normal job, and I answered an advert for a driving job at Funeral Directors, and I was only 25 at the time, naive. So I went along, had an interview for the job, but when I was there, over in the corner, there was a body in a coffin, and the gentleman was giving me the interview and saying, you appreciate there's a dead body over there? And I was like, yeah, no problem. Absolutely didn't want to look at it. So the second time was when I started with William Purvis. I was on hire to them, and I managed to get my job with them. So my very first day, I'd done a home death, and I've not really done a home death before, so the gentleman had died in his bed. And when I went to remove him, he was really warm. So I was not expecting that, because dead people should be cold. So, but now that I know when somebody dies, the body temperature rises, and then it lowers back down. And yeah, so that was my first instance, and I was not expecting it at all.
Wow. What was you've been in the industry for so long. What was your experience of the first time seeing a dead body?
Well, I was only 16. It was my nan, because again, my parents, you know, we wanted to, you know, at home, and that's what happened. And everyone walked into the room, and I was sort of really shocked, because again, I'd not experienced death, because as a child, I think your parents, they shielded you from that. You didn't go to your great nans. You didn't do that. So at 16, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And yeah, it was a shock. It was, oh my God, that's my great nan. And then from after that, it's been normal. And being with a funeral director as well as a partner, that's the topic of conversation in our house. You know, everything is.
Yeah, I think
is death.
When you see a dead body, we're all used to seeing them in the way we see them. There's been a couple of times when I've been on a police removal, and that changes everything for me. So we're used to seeing them in a hospital or a home on a stretcher in a coffin. When you go into somebody's home in a suspicious death, you see them how they are and how they've died. That's way different. You don't expect it, and it takes your mind a wee bit to process it, because it's not natural to see somebody.
See, the different thing for me it is.
Which
is a bizarre thing for me. It's not seeing them peaceful and in a funeral parlour. For me, it's a violent death pretty much the whole time I go out. So it's somebody lying there with their head caved in or stabbed or whatever. So for me, that's what death looks like.
But so my job's very similar, because I see all these things you see, but I've got to make it look okay for the families. So any trauma you see, whether it's the stabbings or it's a crushed skull or anything, we have to repair all that. Right? And that's the difference.
And that's what I'm curious about, because a lot of the things we see, you know the person's going to the mortuary to be identified. pre-post-mortem, and a lot of the time the police are saying, don't think the family really should identify, we should use DNA, we should use fingerprints or whatever, because the person is so badly damaged.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is probably a really difficult question to answer, but is there a limit when you think there's nothing I can do? I mean, what kind of stuff can you do?
There's only 2 cases in my whole career that I've not been able to.
Wow, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
You know, I have a story, there was a wee boy who had, his mum was setting out to play, and he was just, I think he was only 5, and he'd been sent out to play, and a truck had run over him while he was playing, and unfortunately his dad was able to see him at the scene. Oh. So my take on that is, Dad will always remember that, and Mum will always, every time the door goes, she's going to expect it to be him. You know, this wee child went back through Glasgow for to the mortuary, and we had the mortuary technician phoned me and said, is there anything we could do, because she couldn't do anything. So we had the police liaison officer phoned us, and they brought the wee boy through, and we spent 2 days reconstructing him, and his mum and dad was able to come in and sit with him and put his clothes on and hold his hand. So yeah, these ones stick with you a bit, but it's, for me, it's the closure for these guys.
Absolutely,
100%.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's, for you guys in particular, I mean, we probably see a lot more natural deaths, home deaths, where people are expected, you know, there's a journey, there's an understanding it's happening. For you guys, you don't, the people you support and you connect with, it's not often like that. And those stories like that, and for the stuff that you must see, how, I mean, death affects us all, we all grieve, we all feel, and there's a certain heaviness that comes with our job, but there's this whole other level of trauma that comes with you guys. How do you even begin to look after yourselves through that?
The way you go into it, you're as a professional, so when I go in, I know there's going to be a body there. A lot of the times, if it's a murder, there'll be videos, there'll be photographs that we'll sit down and view before we go in, and that takes some of the shock factor away. So what I usually do is I'll go into the crime scene. The first thing I'll do is go and look at the body. Right, that's what I've got. Then I'll maybe go and start looking at the rest of the crime scene, and you're processing it in your head. So by the time I go and actually start taking the samples and collecting the evidence from the body, you've sort of got your head round it. And a lot of people will say that to you, oh, you must be hardened to this, you must be used to this. And I think if you ever got hardened to death, that's when you should stop doing what you do.
I totally agree.
You've just got to be able to learn to drive away from the crime scene and park that.
Compartmentalise, isn't it, your brain?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you go into, I think the way we get closure, you mentioned closure, the way we would get closure is you then go to the laboratory and you gather the evidence, you process the evidence, you put your case together, you go to court. So some of the most terrible murders I've worked on, my way of getting a closure and being able to put a lid on it and put it away is taking that case to court.
Sure.
Yeah.
And knowing that there's justice, knowing that person is not going to go out and do that again.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done. I worked on a murder of a little boy who'd been sexually assaulted, put in a bin chute. And to process his body, he was so tiny that you had to kind of hold him and take samples. And that was probably one of the most difficult ones, because it's very difficult when it's a child to not think, oh, their poor mother, this person's so young. And that's probably the hardest one.
Wow.
I mean, that's the only time I've driven home from a crime scene just in tears.
Yeah.
And just got up the next day, and it was very hard to put that one away. But we did reach a conclusion that the person responsible was convicted. He'd sexually assaulted 3 children prior to that. And was quite matter of fact and said, I killed this boy because I didn't want him to grass on me, basically.
Oh my God.
But to see him get in the jail and to get closure is how we put it to bed.
For my side of things, I know how important closure is for families. So for me, when I get these cases, I've got to look past all the trauma, all the, you know, whatever's wrong, all the stab wounds, all the blood. I can look past that to see what I can achieve to bring them back to normal. They're never going to be themselves, but I can bring them back to a level that's acceptable for viewing, and they will be able to get closure. They'll recognise them, and they'll be able to touch them and talk to them. If you take away that final goodbye,
Totally agree.
it's not good. So,
and knowing you can do that for people is...
And so not a lot of people know what I do, and there's not a lot of people do it. But when you do it, it's very important. And you're literally taking everything and reversing everything that's been done when the guys have been there. We reverse it all and make it as natural as possible.
I was completely unaware that could be done. When I go out to crime scenes, obviously we see people that have died pretty violent deaths and their injuries are really quite horrific. What exactly can you do so that it's acceptable for the family to view them?
So the basics behind the facial reconstruction for me is we will repair everything that's broken. So if you've got a crushed skull, the idea is you would rebuild the skull because it's their skull, and if you build it back, it's their shape, their size, there's no guesswork. Then we'll be able to put the face back on, and then we deal with any soft tissue injuries. So if that's any gouges or bits of missing, or bits of nose missing, we can stabilise that, and then we would use waxes and clay just to fix that and make it more natural looking. And then we use airbrush cosmetics to cover that. If I'm explaining a full reconstruction, it's like a really complicated jigsaw.
Yeah, all the pieces out on like a table, and then literally put it all back together, and that's how we...
Yeah, it's time consuming. It can take you a day, 2 days just for a skull.
To me, facial reconstruction was also if you had a missing person and you were trying to... It never crossed my mind that you could do that for someone.
But, so if you just stick to the basics of it, it's that person. If you use their skull, repair it, and you put their face back on, and you get it as close, as long as you get the features back, people will recognise them.
And can you do like eyelashes and eyebrows?
We've done eyelashes, put eyelashes on. You can replace eyes, nose, ears, hair.
Everything,
hair
absolutely everything, Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
What does happen to the body after death? How does a body change?
They all vary. They vary. The worst cases for me would be a tissue gas case.
Yeah.
Right. So tissue gas will happen when there's maybe a gangrenous foot or an arm or a leg. So it'll start there, and literally I've seen a body go off overnight. And they'll blow up like a football. The features are gone, the eyes are gone. They're twice the size they were. Now, I've treated these cases and I've brought them back to viewing.
Wow.
And so there's nothing that can't be done. It's just whether you take the time, get out of your comfort zone and sort it.
I think again, I see obviously from the moment somebody takes their last breath, which actually more often than not, again in my world, is very natural, and it's actually a lot more peaceful than anybody anticipates. Death is safe. The dying bit is the bit we don't know about, but normally the actual bit of the dying body is okay as far as it can be. So and again, depending on their situation, rigor mortis obviously sets in, eases off, and then comes back in again. So I support some people to look after their person at home. So some people might keep their person's body at home for days, maybe a week, with the right cooling equipment and everything. And it's normally, again, no coroners, nothing traumatic or violent to worry about, and it's all expected. In those situations, we only would really see the changes of things like the skin colour changing, the pooling, where purple patches and the blood starting to settle. So that's what we would normally see. And then I guess I have seen it, but it's not the norm in the community. You guys then see the proper decomposition kicking in with the gases and the everything working and kicking off against each other and stuff, isn't it? That all comes in the weeks that follow.
Sometimes there's been cases where the gas starts to escape and the person's leg will move. And you're sitting in a crime scene with this dead person and suddenly they're groaning in their legs and you're like...
And after death, I literally had it this week where I was there when somebody took their last breath, stayed with the family for a bit, gave them a bit of time, came back in to support to do last offices, which is where we would wash and cleanse the body just on a very basic level and complete any rituals that might be important. But as we were doing that, the person then groaned and breathed, and to some, like, I carried on. It's very the norm. You can see everybody go, and there was this panic waiting for them to do something. But it's all of those things that we know are normal, but actually it's great to share them, because if other people hear and see these things are normal, then they know that when that happens, it's not a scary thing. It's not something to panic about. But I remember the first time it happened where a person actively groaned quite loudly, and there was that moment of, oh, good grief. But then you go, okay, no, hold on, act professional. This is fine.
I mean, I've had cases, obviously, with where they've, hung themselves, skin slip, that can come, to me. So then, obviously, I try and deal with that.
What does that look like? What is skin slip?
Well, it literally comes off. It literally comes off.
The tissue's breaking down, and literally if you just touch something...
It just comes off. So for me, as the same with Martin, you just want to make that person look how they did in life as much as you can, because it is someone's mum, someone's sister, someone's aunt. So for me, seeing that person, and again, sometimes they look nothing like they look like, and I always get photos. Some photos are back in the 1970s, and if they have been ill, it didn't look like them at all. They could have lost weight, they could have put weight on. They're just completely different. So I had one a couple of weeks ago. She, from diagnosis to death, was 5 weeks. She just had her first grandchild, and she came back and her hair was like really curly, but she had it straight. And I had to sit and literally straighten every bit of her hair. And then it brought her back because that's what she looked like. Yeah. So it is trying to get that person to look like, and especially if someone, as I say, has been in hospital, they didn't look like them how they did in life. So that's what I try and do, is to make them look like how people remembered them.
So what you guys are basically saying is you get people back to what they were, to some extent.
Yeah.
A lady I looked after her mum. So I was supporting her kind of in the background while she nursed her mum as she died. So for 6 months, her mum changed. She lost a lot of weight. Her skin changed. Everything about her changed. But this daughter nursed her beautifully. And it was a very sacred, profound 6 months between the two of them. The mum then went to the funeral directors, was made up, was embalmed. The daughter actually was traumatised by seeing her mum look well, because she'd nursed this body for 6 months and connected with this dying, decaying body. She saw the beauty in that. She got so much from that emotionally that actually she needed to see her mum still dead. Yeah. And I do think there's something really powerful, even forgetting the embalming, and I know the reconstruction is needed for a totally different reason, but I do think sometimes we become so focused on making people look undead, yet we have conversations about everyone being honest about death. Yet then why do we try and make them look more alive again? There's a lot to be said for seeing death, seeing someone dead, and making them look well can be hugely supportive and really emotionally supportive, but equally sometimes seeing somebody dead can be just as powerful. Yeah. And that can be a part of the closure for some people.
Yeah, I think...
There's only one I've heard of that.
Yeah, most I think it would be hard.
See, I disagree.
Well, what I was going to say is I think this is the funeral directors or the funeral arrangers' domain. Yes. It's how they put across what the families request and what they want, and it's for us and the embalmers to make sure that happens.
Of course.
So, you know, for my embalming team, if there's anything we're not sure about, we go straight to the funeral director, and then we get them to contact the family.
Sorry, can I jump in? What is embalming?
So embalming, I'll keep it non-technical.
Yeah.
Embalming is injecting a preservative fluid into the arterial system that saturates the tissues and will preserve the body till the time of the funeral. Now, it's very simple.
Yeah. It's an art, though, isn't it? It's a real science.
It's a real science, and if everybody died the same, it would be easy, but it's not. Yeah. So there's factors of, you know, what they've died of, cancer, trauma. You know, there's numerous things.
And what they've died of will impact the decomposition process as well. Yeah. So every person's body is physically different.
So if there's no embalming, it can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
You know,
what happens if you're not embalmed? Like what happens to the body?
This highlights how different our role. Obviously, you guys see it a lot more in depth, and also you deal with things a lot later down the line. So I support people that are generally, because there's no coroners, there's no time delay. Yeah. So not all bodies would need to be embalmed because they can be seen a week or two after death because they've been kept cold.
If they don't deteriorate.
If they don't
deteriorate.
Yes, that's what I mean. If they haven't and everything is okay.
And some murder victims might lie for several weeks.
Yes, that's what I mean. You guys have got the time frame to really think about.
And that's always the first question. If we're going out to murder you like that, how long have they been dead? Then you're thinking, right, what's it going to smell like? What's it going to look like? Is there going to be maggots?
Yes.
You know, it's all those kind of things. It's really, really not a pleasant process.
No.
Especially if they've been in coroners. I've had loads that have been in coroners. They could be up there for a couple of months.
Yeah. So
and also there's temperature change.
I was going to say, it depends. If it's a really hot summer, it's going to happen.
It's a smell that you can't describe.
You can't describe it.
No. So again, myself and my team would embalm people to the best they can and make them look the best they can. When families come in, they'll see what they want to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We need to find out what they want to see.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask if there are any cases, anything that you'll always remember that's really stuck with you.
Yeah, well, I do.
Go for it.
So, quite a few years ago now, it was my employer's daughter was involved in a drunk driver who had mounted the pavement and hit her and her daughter, and unfortunately the granddaughter died. So I had to, basically I was see, somebody who I looked up to and believed in me to start off my journey, he was now looking at me to help him.
Wow.
So I was able to, I spent I think it was a day and a half to reconstruct and put her back together and stuff like that. And that was hard enough as it was for me.
Emotionally.
That sticks, emotionally, it sticks with you forever. But on the Saturday, like literally that afternoon, I was driving up to Aberdeen to go to a wedding, and I thought it was fine. My wife's like, do you want to go? I was like, I'm fine. And when I got there, as soon as the wee girls came out with their dresses on, that was it. So I had to go and leave. But there's numerous ones that stick with you.
Definitely. I mean, I genuinely think I could probably close my eyes and see every single dead body that I've seen at a crime scene. Some stick with you more than others, for obvious reasons, like when it's wee kids. The Angelica Kluck murder will always stick with me because that was the start of the Peter Tobin, which you'll be familiar with. She was a Polish student and she was murdered in Glasgow in a church. She was living and working in a church to raise money to fund her studies, and she was murdered in the church and put under the floorboards of a church. So I attended the original crime scene, took all the samples off her body. The case was high profile because it was a young woman, it was a very violent crime, but it turned out that the person who had murdered her had been posing as a handyman at the church, and he'd given a false name, but it actually turned out he was a guy called Peter Tobin, who was then uncovered to be a serial killer, and the police investigated him further after he was convicted of Angelica's murder, went down to Margate, where he'd lived before, and found 2 girls' bodies in his back garden. And he was convicted of both those murders. So he was actually in jail for the murder of these 3 young women. Wow. And that was probably the first really, really big, high-profile case that I worked on, but because of the follow-up stuff, because he was a serial killer, obviously that's the one that is associated with me. Well done. When I first arrived at the crime scene, she was under the floorboards, but she was underneath a trapdoor to get you down under the church, and the trapdoor was tiny. It was absolutely tiny, and it was actually, how do we get to her body to recover the evidence? Cutting away the floor was a health and safety issue. It would have contaminated the crime scene. So the only answer at the end of the day was for me to go down into the hatch underneath the floorboards. And it was this tiny little space going down into this really dark area with this dead body, which was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying, but once you get down there and you start collecting the evidence, it's like we sort of spoke about, your professional head kicks in. And I collected all the evidence, so I would collect the evidence, pass it up through the hatch. That would be labelled and bagged to go to court, next bit of evidence. So that was the process. So when I came out, it was actually 3.5 hours I'd been under the floorboards with her, and I would have said I'd been about half an hour. It really flew by. It is emotional when you come away from that. It's exhausting. And then we did the lab work and we got a DNA hit on the database, and that's how we knew it was Peter Tobin. And the police apprehended him, and then it's working in the laboratory, gathering the evidence, making sure you do the absolute best job you can. So when you're presenting at court, it's watertight. I was in court for 2.5 days, getting very robustly questioned. When you go to court and the evidence is strong, they attack you as a professional. And that's the way it works, to test the case. But we're impartial as forensic scientists, we're completely impartial. We go and give evidence, but we're not on anyone's side. But I have to be absolutely honest, and when the conviction came through, there was a massive sense of relief.
I bet.
Well done.
For her family. And
Yeah.
On a personal note, in that instance, do you ever think what pain they were in and how they suffered and how she felt lying in there?
No.
Or you don't do that?
I think you have to...
That's the detachment bit,
You've got to not let yourself think that. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess, like you said, does it help with your role knowing you are impartial? In the sense of you're there to do a job, to get the evidence, does that, I guess you stick to that kind of mindset where you're not there to pass judgment or even let your own judgments or feelings come into it. It's about just staying... I think it makes it so hard to do that.
You're just thinking, you know, I'm here, I've got one shot at a crime scene. It's not like you're in the laboratory, you can take something out, examine it, put it back, bring it back out. At a crime scene, you've got one shot before the body's taken away for post-mortem. So you're really just focusing on what do I need to take, what kind of evidence.
Your expertise, I guess.
It is, yeah, your expertise kicks in and you're just really focusing on doing that absolute best job you possibly can, because you can't miss anything, you can't go back, and that's what kicks in.
Yeah.
And I think the most difficult part is when you finish, you leave the crime scene, you drive home.
I can't often remember what I had for breakfast, but I can remember pretty much, I think, everybody that I've supported, particularly the ones where I've been there where they may have taken their last breath. And there's a couple of things. One was a young lad quite a while ago, a few years ago. He was in his early 20s. He was actively dying at home with his mum, with his dad, his family, and obviously it goes against the cycle of life, doesn't it? It's, you know, for children. And his mum was very angry, and the conversation happened very openly with him there. And his mum and dad were very bitter and angry at the world. Why him? Why him? He piped up at 22 years old and went, why not me? You think, how can a 20-year-old be facing his death so bravely, so openly? He totally got it. He had found some level of peace that I know that some 90-year-olds have never got. The thing that sticks with me, I think, is the level of humanness that I see, and I see these incredible people in the most heartbreaking of situations, dying but still living. Yeah. And I can't honestly put into words what my work means to me when I am privileged to just be part of these people's lives and deaths.
I think that's a big word that describes everything that we do, although we all have very different parts.
Yeah.
I think we're all privileged.
Absolutely.
It's a privilege
Absolutely.
to go out and collect evidence. It's a privilege to reconstruct, so someone can view. It's a privilege to spend the last few moments with someone. I think what we do, we are very, very privileged.
Martin, I was just going to ask you, you asked Carol there, does she think about, you know, when she sees somebody, does she think about what's happened to them and the pain? Is that something you've thought about before?
I suppose, like, the thing that just popped in my head, like, I find when people kill themselves and they're lying in front of me, I just feel, I just think, why did it get that bad that you didn't have somebody to speak to? Because there's nothing, you know, I've had young men who are the same age as my son, and I'd be horrific if it was my son. Yeah. So I know how I can only imagine how it would feel. But it just popped in my head. I just wondered if you feel that. But I do question why people do it, because I can't imagine anything in life that you would take your own life for.
The amount of funerals I've done for people that have ended their own lives, and you see all the people there that love them.
Yeah.
And you just think, if only you knew, or if only you could feel it, if only something within you would have allowed you. But then I think it's just, the human brain, like I said, the humans in general, we are weird, we're wonderful, and we all operate so deeply.
But, like, I just think life's a weird thing anyway. Yeah. You see it, I see it. You've got 8, 9, 10-year-olds killing themselves up to, and we see 80, 90-year-olds killing themselves. And I think that doesn't make sense at that end, and it doesn't make sense at that end.
I agree.
It's such a waste of life.
Katie, on that, what is the main thing that people regret or come back to when they're, you know, at that end of life stage or they're on their deathbed?
The thing I probably hear most from people is just the general day-to-day, I wish I had taken that holiday. And it's you always think you have time. Yeah. And the one thing I hear from people most often is that I should have done this, I wish I'd have gone there. And it's never material stuff. It's never, I wish I would have bought the sports car. Or actually, it may be, actually, one guy did wish he'd buy the sports car, but it's because he wanted to do Route 66. So it was more, it's still always connected to the memory they wish they would have made, the place they wish they would have visited, the experiences they wish they would have had, which is then really sad.
Life is too short. Everybody says it.
Yeah.
I think we appreciate it more than most people do.
Yes.
Because it definitely is. Tomorrow's not a given.
Absolutely
for any
right.
of us, so.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And how many, like, dead bodies do you think you've seen?
Oh my goodness, I couldn't even count over 27 years. Loads, absolutely loads. I would.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah, just
wow,
just loads. Yeah,
you win.
yeah, they usually more than me, but
I'd say hundreds.
Yeah. I might be working up to thousands just within between my community work, hospice work, soul midwifery, funerals. That's, you know, 4 different kind of avenues really. So I may be going into thousands, but yeah, definitely hundreds. And that's dying and dead.
Hundreds.
But tens of thousands, that's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in 33 years.
It is,
I wonder how many other people could say that. We really need to get together for like a dinner party. You know, not invite loads of people that don't work in this world. They'd be horrified, wouldn't they?
There's a sort of rising popularity in the UK for assisted dying. I think studies at the moment suggest that 84% of the population would support assisted dying for those with terminal illness. I just wanted to ask, obviously working in the industries you do, how you feel about that.
I think there's going to be a difference.
I think I am a huge fan and advocate of choice and autonomy. I think it's conversations that we should be having more of. I think it should be investigated more of, but I think it has to be managed with with minuscule precision, because I think there is so much room for error in our healthcare system with it. But I do think we are a little bit behind and should be having more open conversations. And I see it very in depth, on, on many layers.
Choice, definitely.
Yeah, choice. Yeah, choice.
Yeah, my thoughts are very similar. I think I've seen so many cases of people from hospices that have come through with horrendous cancers, and I don't think anybody should suffer in that way at all. So in these cases, 100%, my feelings are people should be given the choice. If it was a dog or an animal, they would be put down.
I think I hear that a lot.
They would get put down before that, and we should have the right to say how we go ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think personally, you wouldn't want to be a burden on your own family.
Nobody wants to be seen, and when it gets to these really bad cases, you would not want anybody to see you like that.
No.
You wouldn't want to see yourself like that.
No.
So in these cases, 100%.
In the work you do, have you ever seen or felt or had any signs of life beyond death?
I could be here all day. I could be here all day. But I'm sure in my experience, the way I feel, I think I'm able to do my job to the depths that I can do it, because I do believe that there is something else because of the things that I've seen and experienced.
Yeah, I do.
Whether it be your almost TV kind of stuff where maybe the lights flicker. I've had all of those phenomena, weird type things happen, but equally there is something on an energetic soul level for me that I don't expect anybody else to understand, but that has done something to me on some level where I am absolutely convinced that there is more to life than death. When I have been with somebody through their whole journey, or I'm there when they die, there's just something in the room that I can't explain.
For me, I just feel I don't deal with the emotional side of death with families or anything you do. So for me, I'm just dealing with the dead. So I've just dealt with so many dead people that I can't see there being anything else, because it's so final for me. Right.
I'm like you on a professional level. The person's dead, I'm in, I do my job, I go away, I don't think of it. On a personal level, I do think there's more. I agree with everything you said. In the last night of my husband's life, before he went into essentially a coma, when his mum said goodbye to him, he was feeling her face, feeling her hair, and she said, "I'll be back tomorrow." And it was. He obviously knew he wasn't going to see her again. And he'd said she'd been in the hospice for a few days, and he'd always just she'd said goodbye. He couldn't really talk at that point, but he'd always just, and that was it. But she was feeling, it was like he was trying to memorise her. So that really struck a chord there,
And finally, what are you most proud of about the work that you do?
I get a lot of people asking about how I got into this work, and also a lot of people assume that it's morbid, and I guess again this is we're probably coming at it from very different angles, but a lot of people assume my job is very difficult and very challenging and very emotional, which it is. But equally, there's so much joy, and there can be real magic and beauty in death. And I think that's, for me, I'm passionate and want people to understand that if it's not traumatic in that sense, it can be very much a beautiful thing. It can be a sacred thing that you can sit and be witness to.
I mean, the death part of my job is quite a small part. But, I really would hope that people who are interested in forensic science wouldn't be put off by that. And dealing with that side of it, dealing with murders, it's incredibly rewarding. Given the answers, we've talked a lot about closure today, and a lot of our job is providing that closure, because we can provide that name, that suspect, we can help that get justice for that family and help prevent that person going out and doing that again. I spoke about the Angelica Kluck murder, and as a result of that conviction, it ended up with a conviction of a murder of a girl called Vicky Hamilton, and she'd been missing for 18 years before they found her body. And by sheer quirk of fate, my sister ended up working beside her sister.
Wow.
And she made the connection, and she actually asked to speak to me, and she'd been a very young girl when Vicky had gone missing, but her whole childhood and life had been overshadowed by the fact her sister was missing. And even though the answer they got 18 years later was not what they'd hoped for, it allowed that family and allowed that girl to say, right, that's the end of that chapter.
It was an answer.
Yeah, it was an answer. Yeah. Just being part of that and helping give them that answer is a really big thing.
Mm. You're helping someone and you can't even express how that feels, knowing that you've helped someone at probably their lowest time. They're in a really vulnerable, they're really in quite a bad place, and you've helped them. If I could do it 24/7, I would.
Yeah. It's hard to put into words, though, isn't it? What about the level of gratitude? I think they're helping others.
Yeah.
What it does for you.
Yeah.
Do you not sometimes just feel like I've just done my job?
Well, yeah, but that's what I mean, which is why it's sometimes overwhelming to think I can't.
Yeah.
You can't understand when people are saying, like, you've changed my life, and it's like, but I just did what I instinctively know how to do, and what I want to do, what I'm good at, what I'm expert at, but also what I know I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah. And so many people say, I don't know how you could do that. I could say to you, I don't know how you do it. But you do, and you just, I don't know, I think we were made to do that.
Absolutely.
When you're in addiction, you are isolated. You're cutting yourself off from every relationship, and then it's like, oh, I wonder why I'm drinking myself to death or using myself or doing whatever to death, and it's like, because what else have you got going on?